You are 3 days old. You weigh barely 3 kilograms. You can't run. You can't hide. You can't even shiver properly to stay warm. By almost every measure of survival, you're one of the most vulnerable mammals on Earth. Somewhere past that fire, in the dark, something knows exactly what you are. And yet, somehow, you survived. Not you personally, but the tiny, unbroken chain of babies that eventually became you. Every generation had to make it through nights exactly like this one, over and over, for 300,000 years. If even one of them had failed, just once, you wouldn't exist. You wouldn't be watching this right now. And the thing that saved the most babies wasn't a weapon, a fire, or a shelter. It was something so shocking that if most parents saw it happen today, they'd probably try to stop it. Yet for thousands of generations, it quietly helped keep human babies alive. We'll get to that. It's coming. Here's a question nobody asks. Why is human birth so hard in the first place? A baby giraffe drops 2 meters to the ground and is walking within an hour. A baby chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur within minutes of being born. A human baby can't even hold up its own skull. Compared with almost every other mammal, humans are born unusually early in their development. Evolution had to balance 2 impossible demands at once: bigger brains, and a pelvis narrow enough to walk upright on 2 legs. Something had to give. So we're born with brains only about a quarter of their adult size, pushed out early, unfinished, by design. This isn't a flaw. It's a trade-off scientists call the obstetric dilemma, and it means a human infant cannot survive alone. Not for one night. Not in theory. So the real question was never how babies were born. It was how anyone kept them alive after. But being born helpless was only the beginning. Because the world outside the womb was even harder. Picture a Pleistocene winter. Sub-zero winds. A newborn who can't generate her own body heat. Cold exposure was one of the single biggest killers of ancient infants, and mothers fought it with something almost embarrassingly simple: their own bodies. Skin-to-skin contact, tailored hide swaddling, fires deliberately placed near cave entrances, close enough to warm a sleeping infant, but positioned so the smoke wouldn't fill the shelter and choke tiny developing lungs. Even fire placement was survival engineering. And there was a second, constant threat right alongside the cold, a threat with teeth. Imagine carrying your baby almost every waking hour, not because you wanted to, but because putting them down for too long could mean they never woke up again. Ancient mothers carried infants against their bodies in slings woven from hide, sinew, and plant fiber. It solved 3 problems at once. Body heat prevented hypothermia, hands stayed free for foraging, and constant physical contact kept a helpless infant out of reach of predators, animals like cave hyenas, prowling exactly where a mother might set her child down for even a moment. In Ligure, Italy, archaeologists uncovered the grave of an infant girl buried 10,000 years ago. They called her Neve. She was 40 to 50 days old when she died, wrapped in a sling decorated with more than 70 shell beads. Picture someone wearing those same beads for years. Through rain, through winter, through countless ordinary days of survival. Then one day, they remove every single one, not to decorate themselves, but to sew them onto the sling of a newborn girl. Archaeologists know this because microscopic wear marks show those beads had spent years rubbing against adult skin before they ever touched Neve's sling. Whatever happened, the sling couldn't save her, but instead of reusing those precious beads, her family buried them with her, as if the sling itself had become part of her story. And Neve wasn't alone in receiving this kind of care. In Syria, a 2-year-old Neanderthal child was buried with a flint blade resting on his chest and a stone slab beneath his head. Deliberate, careful, unmistakably, an act of grief. In Alaska, 11,500 years ago, 2 infants were buried directly beneath a family's hearth, surrounded by salmon remains, in what may be the most protected spot the camp had to offer. These weren't people who saw infant death as ordinary and moved on. They mourned like we do. Then came a survival trick that still shocks scientists and parents alike. Ready for the strangest survival trick of all. Ancient mothers didn't always feed babies with spoons. They used their own mouths. It sounds unhygienic. Modern pediatric guidance actively warns against it. But look at what it was actually doing. Here's the problem it solved. Human deciduous molars don't erupt until close to 2 years old, but breast milk alone can't fuel a rapidly growing brain past about 6 months. So infants were caught in a gap, hungry for solid calories, physically unable to chew them. Premastication, a parent chewing food and passing it mouth to mouth into the infants, closed that gap instantly. But it did something else too. Adult saliva carries antimicrobial compounds, lysozyme, antibodies, protective proteins that can neutralize pathogens lurking in raw or tough foods before they ever reach a baby's gut. And scientists believe the microbes transferred along with that saliva may have helped shape the developing gut microbiome and support the infant's growing immune system, training the body early on what to tolerate and what to fight. What looks like an unsanitary shortcut may actually have been a functioning nutritional and immunological bridge. one of many biological interactions that modern feeding methods simply don't reproduce in exactly the same way. And this wasn't rare or regional. Anthropologists have found it across nearly every pre-industrial culture ever studied, on every inhabited continent. As strange as that sounds, it wasn't their only innovation. In Bronze Age graves in Central Europe, 3,000 years old, archaeologists found small ceramic vessels shaped like animals, each with a narrow spout. At first, they weren't sure what they were looking at. Toys, ritual objects, tiny oil lamps. Chemical residue analysis finally revealed the answer: fatty acids from cow, sheep, and goat milk, preserved inside the unglazed clay for 3,000 years. They had been used to feed babies. Baby bottles, 3,000 years before the word bottle existed, and this mattered for more than convenience. It meant a baby could be fed by anyone, not just its mother, which meant a mother recovering from illness, or exhausted, or gone, no longer meant a starving infant. It was one more thread reinforcing something ancient. Parenting depended on completely, but no invention mattered without something even more important. No mother, not even the strongest, could do this alone. Researchers estimate raising one child to independence required roughly 13 million calories beyond what a mother needed just to keep herself alive. That's not a number one forager pulls off solo, while also nursing, walking miles a day, and staying alert for predators. So the burden was shared. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and fathers all fed, carried, and protected infants that weren't biologically theirs. In some hunter-gatherer societies studied today, fathers are within arm's reach of their infants nearly half the time. Other women would nurse a child that wasn't their own when a mother couldn't, a practice called ancient and nearly universal. There's even a name for one piece of this pattern: the grandmother hypothesis, the theory that human menopause itself evolved specifically so older women could stop having children of their own and pour that energy into keeping their grandchildren alive instead. It wasn't a nuclear family raising a child behind closed doors. It was an entire group, quietly betting its future on every single infant. Even then, survival was never guaranteed. Even with all these survival strategies, many children never reached adulthood. Bioarchaeologists estimate that somewhere between 40 and 50% of children died before the age of 5. Nearly 1 in 3 infants didn't survive their first year. Cold, starvation, infection during the dangerous transition off breast milk, predators, on rare but real occasions. And the evidence shows something important. They weren't numb to it. Infant graves across the Paleolithic and Mesolithic are careful, arranged bodies, grave goods, sometimes flowers, sometimes a lifetime's worth of beads sewn into a sling. Every single one of these burials is an argument against the idea that ancient people didn't feel this loss deeply. They did. They just kept going anyway, generation after generation, refining what worked. And that's what makes what happened next so extraordinary. They had no antibiotics, no formula, no pediatricians, no car seats, no baby monitors. What they had was each other, a body used as a shelter, a sling built from years of someone else's memories, saliva turned into medicine, clay turned into a bottle, and an entire group of near strangers who decided, without ever saying it out loud, that every child was worth protecting. Somewhere, perhaps 30,000 years ago, a mother pulled her baby a little closer to the fire. She couldn't have known that one small decision would echo across hundreds of generations, but it did. Because every person alive today exists only because countless ancient mothers won battles that history never recorded. Your family tree isn't built only on great hunters or famous leaders. It's built on ordinary mothers who somehow kept impossible babies alive. In an impossible world, one cold night, one chewed bite of food, one tightened sling at a time,